Spoiler alert. Please be advised that the following video will contain spoilers for Lovecraft Country. What's up everybody, it's me E-Man from E-Man's Movie Reviews. Just got done watching episode 9 of Lovecraft Country. Wow, look, that was a very tough episode to get through, to say the least. We definitely got, I want to say, one of the most dramatic episodes to date with this whole series. We didn't get like any, magical crazy sex scenes or anything weird like that. We did get some science fiction. And the real monster of this entire show is racism. So let me kind of warn you right here, right now. We're going to have a difficult conversation. Might be controversial for some, might be triggering for some. I'm going to obviously go through the episode. I'm going to share some information to give you some background and some context. I'm actually going to probably give you some information that you probably haven't heard about as well. And yeah, we're going to have a very, very interesting and hopefully fruitful conversation. So make sure you stay all the way to the end because I've got a very important question that I want you all to answer. And without further ado, let's get to it. We open up the episode with everyone finally surrounding Dee and paying her some attention. Ruby correctly checks everyone by saying that they all were to blame for not looking after Dee. And Ruby's right. Everyone was to blame. But Ruby, I'm gonna need you not to act like you wasn't out here having some magical jungle fever sex too. Come on now. You wasn't looking for Dee either. And by the way, we not gonna talk about that black shoggoth that came out the ground? I mean, Letty's whole house got shot up. We not gonna talk about that? Oh, okay. In case some of you missed it, and thankfully some of you did mention this in the comments of the last episode's video, the theme that's being reiterated in this opening scene is actually the theme of how black women typically go unheard and be ignored. And all of this is kind of demonstrated through Diana's journey. So when we see Dee running around looking for help and everyone tending to their own issues, it's not until Dee is almost comatose that people are actually starting to pay attention. And here's the thing. If this concept of black women being ignored sounds new or if it's a foreign concept to you, I want you to just go online, go to Google, and search the words black women healthcare. And you'll find a number of articles and studies where black women have gone into the hospital and just been straight up ignored. Or they've been just discriminated against. So they could come in and be like, ooh, my side hurts. And somebody's like, here's a Tylenol, get out of here. Meanwhile, they have liver cancer or something crazy. I don't know. So I just say that because the whole theme of black women being ignored is not something that was just randomly thrown in there. It's real. Well, the only option to help Dee is to call Christina because she's the most familiar with magic. Tick says that the best play is to give Christina Titus's pages. Letty had that guilty look on her face because she already gave those pages away in exchange for the invulnerability spell. Letty confessed to giving up the pages and Montrose loses it and starts to get buck with Letty. Man, when he started to get all up in Letty's face, you know how when your whole body just flex, I was like, bruh, hey man, hold on man, you're not gonna touch my journey now. Tick might have put him paws on you, but I'll lay you out, partner. As we see Dee's arm is getting ashier and ashier beyond the help of any cocoa or shea butter. So Ruby decides to call Christina for help because she believes that Christina will help them since, they're magical booty lovers. Christina shows up and thanks to Dee's drawings, Christina has a better idea of how to help and what was going on. I'll say this again, I love the representation here. Just like her mama Hippolyta, Diana is just as gifted and she is a straight up genius artist. I can't express how important it is to show minorities how they can also excel in different areas that they normally don't see on a regular basis. So I love it. The curse is a combination of Horatio and Titus's pages. So unless they have the Book of Names, the only one who can undo the curse is that racist police captain Lancaster. Now, they didn't admit the truth about what really happened at the house, but they did tell Christina that Lancaster died. The best thing Christina can do right now is to perform a restoration spell. However, all this spell will do is only reset the cycle of the curse, meaning that it might help Dee only temporarily, but at the end of the day, Dee will still die. Christina is willing to do this, but only in exchange for Tick to willingly be a sacrifice for her ritual and becoming immortal during the autumnal equinox. Tick agrees to her demand. Christina also says that in order to perform the restoration spell, they are going to need the blood of her closest relative. Well, this obviously puts them in a very awkward situation because Uncle George is dead and Hippolyta is just still gone. So all eyes fall on the Montrose. Well, we see the racist Captain Lancaster is not dead after all, but he is suffering from the wounds he endured from the black shagoth that chewed him up like a Scooby snack. Apparently, these racist cops have been continuing in the terrible practice of kidnapping black people to use them as body parts. Every time they try to switch out a body part, the wounds continue to reappear. And that's when William shows up to brag about the fact that the wounds will continue to come back because of the magical item that was placed in the captain's desk by Ruby a few episodes back. Turns out, Christina placed the regeneration spell on him, which is forcing the captain to be stuck in a loop of regenerating the wounds and leaving him in a continual state of suffering. That is, until William takes the magical item away, which now allows the racist captain to finally die. Well, Christina finally got her revenge on the racist police captain, and mainly that's because he was the one that killed the real William. Something else to note here. Christina could have actually helped this racist captain live, but she let him die. And this is where I think she's really becoming a true villain. Because don't forget, the captain was the only person that could have lifted the curse from Dee. And Christina also wants Tick in exchange for her to do her magical ritual or whatever to become immortal. So by letting that captain die, she actually took away the one major option that Tick and everybody needed to help save Diana. Man, that was a shrewd move. After taking a shot of some homemade moonshine, Montrose finally admits to Tick that he may be George's son. Montrose said that he, George, and Tick's mother grew up very close together and that after the massacre, it created an unbreakable bond. Huh? Tick, of course, is besides himself. No, hold up! We're not about to just skip over that. I mean, y'all caught that, right? Was it just me or did that strike anyone else as a little odd? What you mean an unbreakable bond? I mean, was that just friends with extra benefits? Help me understand. Tick, of course, is besides himself with this news. He's angry because he used to wish that Uncle George was his real father, given all the physical abuse that Montrose put him through. I mean, man, I knew they had to talk, but man, Montrose just came right out with it. So just like that, okay, I guess we're here now with it. And the key thing that I took away from this conversation is notice in Montrose's language. He kept saying maybe that Tick might be George's son. He didn't say that it was definite. I mean, let's remember here, this was the 1950s. Maury was not around hooking people up with DNA tests yet. Now, back in episode 2, I believe, Montrose and George did have a conversation, and Montrose said, like, hey, we settled this in regards to who was Tick's father. So at this point, I'm just wondering, like, man, did y'all just play rock, paper, scissors and be like, okay, you the dad? Hippolyta walks in asking if Dee's sick. Hold up! No, y'all not about to do this. Y'all not about to sit here and have Hippolyta just walk right in like it was just a casual Tuesday or something after you've been gone for weeks and you just gonna sit here and act like, hey, everybody, where's Dee? She okay? No, woman, where have you been? Looks like the curse on Dee is actually turning her into one of the demonic Pickaninny sisters that was chasing her in the last episode. Thanks to Hippolyta's blood, Dee is back to normal, for now. Ruby and Letty get into a disagreement about whether Christina is trustworthy or not. Letty tells Ruby about the autumnal equinox and how Christina is actually willing to sacrifice Tick. Man, look, I'll be honest, I'm not really feeling how Ruby is like so trusting of Christina, but I also understand the fact that they have a complicated relationship too. And to this date, Christina really hasn't done anything to like lie to Ruby or screw her over. Wait, no pun intended. But you would kind of think that, like, after Ruby and Letty had patched things up in the previous episode, that maybe, just maybe, Ruby would actually consider Letty's feelings a little bit more. Hippolyta is in need of the source of magic and any information about the curse that was put on Dee. She explains that they have to go into the multiverse machine that originally opened up the portals in episode 7. Even though the machine was damaged the last time we saw it, Hippolyta can fix it right up. And she also has an alternative key. She also explains where and when she's been all this time. Let's go! Nerd powers activate! It's often said that, magic is just science that hasn't been understood yet. So Hippolyta just comes through with like all this expansive knowledge that she's learned from traveling the multiverse and all these different parallel universes and different times. So just so that we're clear, even though Hippolyta has only been gone for about a week's time during these 1950s with Tick and everybody, she was on a different version of Earth for about 200 plus years. Every time Hippolyta was able to declare herself something and travel between these different parallel worlds, she collected knowledge and wisdom each time. Christina returns back home with Ruby. Ruby finds out that the white lady that she's been transforming into was actually a groundskeeper named Dell, who ended up in a coma after Letty hit her upside the head. Ruby and Christina then get into an argument about what Christina's true intentions really are when she came to help Diana. Christina admits that she did come for Ruby, but she also saw an opportunity to get Tick. Christina needs all of Tick's blood in order for her to become immortal because she wants to experience the world. As she put it, she wants an eternity of firsts. Ruby's only request is for Christina not to hurt Letty, and Christina agrees to that. Ruby then proceeds to turn off the life support, which presumably kills Dell. First of all, I want to know what was that book that Christina put in that safe, and what else is in that safe? Second, I gotta say, I know Christina is supposed to be the antagonist here, but I really appreciate her upfront honesty about things. Like, she is not shy about talking about what she wants, and I think that's exactly why Ruby is so loyal to her. I mean, Ruby is going along with all of this because she agrees and probably admires Christina's ownership of herself. And Christina is actually walking the walk of taking charge of her personhood. And Ruby's been like in agreement with that ever since she took that magic potion. I mean, even at the end of the scene, Ruby said that she could see herself as a red-headed white woman. So I suppose she's very interested in continuing this magical ride with Christina. We go back to Kentucky where the observatory is located, and Montrose is hearing all of the traumatic experiences from his life all over again. He's clearly triggered by the events in Tulsa. Montrose tells Letty that he knows that she's pregnant and that Tick went to the future. Hippolyta manages to fix the multiverse machine. Since the machine doesn't have a motherboard, Hippolyta ends up jacking herself into it thanks to the futuristic devices that are still in her wrists. Wait, hold on. Did y'all see when Hippolyta asked Montrose for the picture? And Montrose started to give like this dramatic monologue about my mama when I was young did this and my daddy saved every penny. And Tick came up and was like, give me that damn picture. I got time for this foolishness. Tick is so bogus. Look, man, Tick, you can't keep punking Montrose like this, man. He's still your fake daddy. As Hippolyta gets the portal open and Tick and Letty jump in, Montrose is clearly paralyzed with fear given what's about to come. He finally jumps in and now we're back to 1921 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I think it's going to be helpful to give you the necessary context to understand why the Tulsa Massacre is such an important event and why this whole episode is wrapped around it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you why it's important for the characters in the story, and then later, towards the end of the video, I'll tell you why it's actually still relevant for today. During the early part of the 20th century, Tulsa, Oklahoma was home to one of the most affluent African American communities in the United States. This area, which was later named Greenwood, was probably considered to be the epicenter of black ownership and self-sufficiency. Black entrepreneurs flocked to this area and businesses soared from hotels, schools, grocery stores, a post office, banks, buses, taxis, hospitals, law offices, and so much more. This ultimately led to the community being famously known as Black Wall Street. It didn't take long, however, for many of the local white residents to resent the upscale life of the black residents they deemed to be inferior. Racial violence, lynch mobs, and anti-black riots were not uncommon, and there was also a resurgence of the KKK. So the blacks in Greenwood were encouraged to take up arms to protect themselves. In 1921, a 19-year-old by the name of Dick Rowland was accused of sexually assaulting a 17-year-old white girl named Sarah Page. As the calls for lynchings got louder and louder, the sheriff of the town refused to hand over Rowland to the angry white mob. A group of 75 black men from Greenwood came to the courthouse to protect Rowland. Well, a group of 1,500 white people came to clash with that group of black men. As the black men retreated back to Greenwood, In less than 24 hours, the white mob of almost now 2,000 eventually followed and thus began the rioting, looting, and killing that is known today as the Tulsa Massacre. This mob, by the way, was also assisted by the police and even the National Guard. More than 35 blocks of homes and businesses were destroyed, and 10,000 people were made homeless, and as many as 300 black people were killed. The town was left in ruins. The blacks who did not escape were held in internment camps in the city. While the riot did make national news, the Tulsa media, however, refused to mention these riots and essentially tried to sweep it under the rug. Within the black community at that time, talk of the riots were also not mentioned, given how traumatic the events were on the community. Black people simply tried to suppress that trauma and not speak of it, especially to their children. I gotta be honest with you, I didn't know a lot of this information. It's not like some of this stuff was taught to us in school either. So, once I started looking all this stuff up and researching it, I gotta say, I had to take a breath and just pause for a minute. I mean, taking in all this information, it was heartbreaking. And now I know that this show wasn't just over exaggerating with Montrose's character. Everything that Montrose is going through is probably what black people at that time, or Tulsa survivors, what they actually experience. That unresolved trauma and pain is just, whew, man, it has got to be heavy to carry. But you know what really got to me? I have to say it was actually seeing the town of Greenwood in Oklahoma. And I'm talking about a town that was flourishing just 40 plus years after slavery was abolished. So just imagine you were probably a 60-year-old person who was in chains, and now you're living in Tulsa and you're living in one of the most prosperous areas ever. I mean, to see the town of black folks just being at peace. Just living their lives, minding their own business. And in the back of my mind as an audience member, I'm sitting there and just waiting, knowing that all of this is about to be stripped away from them in less than 24 hours. That hurt. And I'm sorry to go on with this, but I hope you'll indulge me just a little bit longer, because there's an important thing that I discovered that I think a number of people are going to miss and probably won't be discussed on other channels. Now, I know some of you have actually watched the HBO show Watchmen. Fantastic show. You should go watch it. And for a number of people, that was the very first time they ever heard of the Tulsa Massacre at all, let alone to see, a reenactment of it. So the Tulsa Massacre was definitely one of the most well-known race riots in America. However, did you know that Black Wall Street wasn't the first nor the only time that a successful and aspiring black community was destroyed by white neighborhoods? I won't go into a long explanation on that, but I'd encourage you to learn about all of these different race riots that happened before and after the Tulsa Massacre. I'll also leave a link in the description for you to learn more about them for anyone that's interested. Okay, let's get back to the episode. Well, the crew only has a few hours before the massacre is about to take place. They change clothes to better blend in. They have to be careful as to not do anything to change the future. Montrose recounts how Tick's mother's entire family burnt up inside the house because of the riot fires. As they make their way to Tick's mother's house, Montrose is paralyzed again by fear. Tick thinks that it's all due to Montrose being drunk, and it escalates to the point where Tick declares that after they make sure Dee is safe, their relationship is done. Whoa, I gotta say, at this point in the episode, I couldn't really blame Tick for going off on Montrose like that. I mean, Tick has felt like he's been lied to, that he's been abused his whole life by Montrose, and that Montrose could be potentially jeopardizing, the safety of his family. And I also think this made for a really great setup for what was to come later. We go through the Greenwood neighborhood, seeing kids playing in the streets and people going about their peaceful day. Just then, we see a young Montrose be publicly and physically abused by his drunk father because Montrose was trying on George's prom jacket. Meanwhile, a young Uncle George stood by and watched while Tick's mother, Dora, came out to defend Montrose. Man, I mean, this scene I thought was powerful for a number of reasons. For one, we see why Uncle George was so remorseful in the previous episodes when he was basically saying like, man, I really should have been there for Montrose. Second thing, which is kind of deep, Montrose has to sit back and get a front row seat to his own traumatic childhood experience and do nothing about it. Then you add another layer to that where you got Tick watching his father get his own butt whooped the same way that his father was beating on Tick when he was younger. So now Tick can see where Montrose gets his alcoholic and abusive tendencies from. And this is what I meant by a great setup when Tick went off on Montrose earlier. Because just imagine how upset we tend to get with our family or with our friends, but we don't have the ability to see what made that person into the person that they are today. Now that of course is not to excuse people's bad behavior, but what it does do, especially with Tick in this scenario, is it gives Tick a deeper understanding of Montrose and possibly a deeper sense of empathy for Montrose moving forward. So I really appreciate how this show was able to use interdimensional time travel to demonstrate a live therapy session. Montrose slips away and Tick and Letty split up to stop him from changing the past. Before they leave, right then and there, they decide to call their child George. Later, Letty is attacked by the white mob, but she is saved by Tick's grandparents. Thankfully, because of the market cane, she was still invulnerable to the gunshots too. She goes into the house for safety. The family gets their weapons ready and they begin to stand their ground. Look, I started getting charged up when I saw this black family armed and ready to fight against this racist mob. But man, once again, this really started to get to me. Just imagine you're chilling at home, probably eating Sunday dinner or something like that, and all of a sudden you got crazy armed racist people outside ready to burn and shoot you up, all because of the color of your skin. This is just getting stressful. By the way, you know the racist white guy, when he recited Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo, he was actually saying the rhyme the way it was originally intended. The words Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo catch a N-word by the toe. If he hollers, let him go, Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo. And the alternate version of that is catch a Negro by his toe. If he hollers, make him pay $20 every day. The meaning of this rhyme is rooted in the slave trade. There's an idea that it comes from slave selection or a description of what white slave owners would do if they caught a runaway slave. By the way, I was trying to figure this out, but could any of you kind of explain why Beulah was important here? I kept trying to rack my brain as to why they included that scene with her and Letty, but I couldn't come up with what made this scene significant. So if anybody has any thoughts, please share them in the comments. Tick finds Montrose at the park. Montrose then begins to tell Tick the story about his friend Thomas, who was shot and killed by the racist mob. Montrose wants to save Thomas so badly, but Tick stops him because any alteration to the past could wipe Tick and others completely out of existence. First of all, let me just say, this is why Michael K. Williams is one of my favorite actors. My man acted his butt off in this scene. There's no way you can watch this and not feel and connect with this dude. But we have to take a moment and also talk about what Montrose revealed when he started talking about Thomas. Because all of this essentially explains why Montrose is the way he is. This experience with Thomas was a major point in his life. Montrose broke up their friendship because Thomas was gay, and Montrose lied to himself about his own true desires. He then said that he tore out all of the soft parts within himself just to be a man, and that men have sons. He swallowed his pride when Tick's mother, Dora, was pregnant, and there was a chance that George could be the father. But Montrose had to claim Tick as his own son because that was his validation to this awful notion of what he believed was masculinity. For him, claiming Tick affirmed the lie that he told himself that he wasn't gay. And I believe this is what was meant when Montrose and George said that they actually settled Tick's paternity in the past. You know, I'm sitting here thinking that maybe Uncle George probably felt like he owed Montrose, to claim Tick as his own son, as a way to make up for the fact that he didn't really protect Montrose back in the past when they were younger. But man, it is so crazy to see Montrose have to go through what he went through, all because of what he believed. I mean, this is what people talk about when they talk about different forms of toxic masculinity. I mean, cutting out all the soft parts so you could be a man. Look, I'm definitely guilty of this myself, so I'm not here to judge anybody. Because even I'm still kind of reluctant to, really be emotional and cry about certain things, right? But I'm glad the show took the time to show us this kind of stuff so that we could see through Montrose what this type of belief can actually lead to in a person. We go back to the house with Letty and Tick's great-grandmother, let's just call her Gigi for now, when she finds Letty snooping around. She recognized something was off with Letty because her shoes looked very strange. Letty comes straight out with the truth and tells her that she's from the future and that they're after the Book of Names to help protect her great-grandson's cousin. Letty continues to tell Gigi about her pregnancy and the future family that is to come. Gigi decides to give Letty the Book of Names, and she stays to pray with Letty as Gigi stands there and burns to her death. My goodness, I mean, it's literally like one blow after the other with this episode. And you know what? I don't want people to miss the impact of the very important decision that Gigi made here. She just got hit with a lot of crazy information here all at once. There are crazy racist rioters outside ready to kill. The house is on fire. You just hear the sound of your daughter calling you for help, but with all this new information, you cannot help them because you have to die in order for your future family to live. Then I really appreciated the fact that in this moment of distress, knowing full well what was about to happen, this woman of God decided to pray with Letty. Non-believers tend to think that religious people use faith as a crutch that disillusions them. Quite the contrary, actually. Faith, as we see here, is the necessary tool used by believers to help them through some of the most dire and stressful moments in life. Without her faith, she would have just gone out and probably done something reckless, maybe even changed the future. But she had that trust in a higher power that gave her not only a sense of comfort, but also the courage to make such a difficult decision. And once again, Black women are coming through saving generations. Come on! Going back to the park, we see the white racist mob pull up and they shoot Thomas. While Dora and George come up to the scene to help Montrose, the mob was still too much for them to handle. That is, until Montrose says that there's another part of the story that wasn't told to Tick. That was the story of a mysterious stranger who came into the fight to save them while swinging a bat like Jackie Robinson. Well, Tick put two and two together, picked up a bat, and got himself a couple of grand slams. Yo, and Tick got that bat, and he was out there swinging and hitting them racists straight out the park. Look, even the racist woman could catch it. Tick was out here handing out equal opportunity ass whoopings for the free. Of course, this seems all like a nod to Tick's dream from the very first episode where we saw Jackie Robinson come in and save Tick from those monsters. So I guess in a sense, it's kind of a parallel because Tick did come in to save everyone from, the monsters of racism. Now, for my fellow nerds out there, we gotta talk about the time travel and the implications that happened here. Nerd powers activate! Now, I am not about to sit here and dissect through all the different theories that have been tossed around ever since episode 7. And that's primarily because I think the writers are just throwing around and mixing up a lot of different theories about parallel universes, multiverses, and time travel. Either way, it really doesn't matter because time travel is science fiction, so they can make up whatever they want. However, just to kind of explain how this time travel works, what we see happening with Tick is an example from the fixed timeline theory. This basically means that everything in time is fixed. Even if you go back in time, your actions are exactly what causes the future, so you really can't change the past. If anything, you could be the very cause of the past. So, in other words, Tick went back in time, saved his parents, all three of them, which allowed for Tick's birth to even be a possibility. You can kind of see this logic played out if you remember the first Terminator movie. We also now know that because of Letty's actions, that's why Cousin Ethel's friend said that the book was burned or lost during the massacre. All this time traveling caused their own past to happen the way that it did. Look, I already know time travel could be very confusing, but I hope nobody got lost from that. As the once peaceful town is now set on fire, Montrose and Tick race to return back. They find that Hippolyta is struggling to keep the portal open, and the multi-dimensional device is overheating. Montrose is left behind, and he's recounting the deaths of the people during the massacre. Now, planes are dropping bombs on the town, and we see Letty with the Book of Names walking down the street. Alright, first thing, I do believe that a lot of the names and stories that Montrose was talking about were actually real life, tragedies that happened during the riots. For example, I did look up the Dr. Jackson that Montrose mentioned. That's actually Dr. A.C. Jackson, who was like a renowned surgeon. So feel free to look those people up and their stories if you can. Then, as this whole scene was going on, I'm sitting here like, hold on, man. You mean these white racists got planes to bomb on this town too? I mean, golly, I knew the police was involved. I understand the National Guard. I mean, did they have the Air Force too? Then, oh my gosh, to see Letty walking through this whole time, I'm like, baby girl, move. Hippie is out here fighting to keep this portal open, and you just being cool, not looking at explosions. Now, I get it. Letty just came through a real tough time and a tough situation. And this did make for a really beautiful scene with the cinematography and everything. But still, move! This ain't the time. We on a deadline, boo! After Letty decided to take her sweet time getting back, we see the extreme toll of stress on Hippolyta has now caused her hair to turn blue, now matching the blue hair from the comic book character that Diana created. Montrose and Letty jump through the portal and return with the Book of Names, and all is well for now. Whew, man, that was heavy. What a ride. This show just keeps on putting us through the ringer. I mean, I feel like I can actually breathe again now, But I gotta say, this was such a tough episode to watch. Seeing stuff like this and knowing that it was real history, that this happened to real Americans, to real people. My heart just aches just having all this knowledge, and then seeing it doesn't do it any better either. Anyway, we got one episode left. How are they gonna wrap all this stuff up? I mean, are we gonna get a 2-hour special, or is this gonna go into season 2? If you've got any thoughts or theories on where this is gonna go, let me know in the comments down below. Anyway, before I go, I do want to highlight one other important point. Earlier in the video, I did say that I was gonna talk about why all this stuff that happened is still relevant for today. Now, you're going to have some people out there that are thinking, man, this happened so many years ago. Get over it. Stop being a victim. Blah, blah, blah. Stuff like that. Well, just like this show is highlighting, racism never stopped right when slavery was abolished. But I say this because while we see things like the Tulsa Massacre happen, black families have been suffering generational trauma and the loss of generational wealth for decades upon decades. Every time black folks try to rebuild themselves, pick themselves up with those good old bootstraps, one way or another, white society burns the entire thing down, including those boots. Even if you fast forward beyond the 1950s Jim Crow stuff, you still have the issue of civil rights, redlining, which prevented blacks from fair housing, banking discrimination, which prevented them from getting fair loans, and a whole host of other forms of discrimination. And at the same time, while all of this is happening, with all the riots, looting, and murders that were happening, very few to anyone at all has actually been held accountable, let alone convicted for the crimes. So I'll leave you all with this question, and I'm particularly more interested, especially if you're not a black person, for your opinion on this. With the constant stripping away of generation after generation of black prosperity, trying to live that American dream with no justice for the crimes committed against black Americans, like we've seen with slavery and the race riots and massacres, is the question of reparations unreasonable to you? Now, I don't want you to start getting tripped up about how much it would cost or what form it would look like. I'm just interested in your honest opinion on if you think African Americans are at least owed some type of amends given the history of treatment the country has put African Americans through. There's no right or wrong answer here, so feel free to comment as you please. Okay, man, that was long. So sorry for taking a little bit longer, but yeah, there was a lot to discuss for sure. If you've made it to this point, thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video. I mean, when I say that, I really do mean it, because these videos, they be taking me a long time to make. So if anybody is actually able to sit down and watch them, my goodness, that makes all the work worth it. If you're new here and you like what you see, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that bell just to make sure that you don't miss out the next time I drop a video. In the meantime, I've got more videos and reviews to do for you all, and until next time, I'll see you all later.